And it's that simple. You got to put in the work and you got to be patient because this shit takes a lifetime. And unfortunately, it's not a test where you can, you can get a score on it.
Welcome to the SkilledDad Podcast. This is the podcast for dads of all seasons to learn the things that they can do and engage so that they can go and equip the next generation for success. Here we sit down with everyday dads just like you to learn from their story, get inspired, and then start getting after it. So we invite you to join in, see what you can take away from this story, and apply to your life on your journey to becoming the skilled dad. Hey guys, welcome to the SkilledDad Podcast. My name is Zach Reeser. I'm your host. And if this is your first time joining us, we want to say thank you for joining us. And if you're one of the crew that's been coming back time and again, we want to say thank you for coming back. And you are part of what makes SkilledDad awesome. You're telling your friends about it, you're learning some things, and you're applying it. And then you're going to hit repeat and gain those skills. And I know you're going to gain some stuff today because of who I've got joining me. And we had a conversation about a week ago, and it was one of those where you just start flowing, and you're like, man, we could keep going all day long, but we do have kids, we do have jobs, we have lives to live, and we said, hey, let's put the pause button and continue it when we sit down in front of a microphone. And that is Mr. Sean Martin. I'm going to tell you about him, but first off, Sean, thanks for being on SkilledDad Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Zach. Good morning. How are you, brother?
Rocking and rolling. And it is morning for us. Regardless of what time you're listening, we're getting our day started. And we're just saying, this is a great way to start the day. So Sean, just a little bit about Sean, then I'm going to pass it to him because he's got, all the good context around his journey. But when we were talking, I was just first impressed by kind of his presence. And, I don't mean like presence, like he's there, but, presence when it's just like you're around somebody, you got the energy, you've got kind of the excitement and just some of that power in there. And then I heard about what he's doing. I'm just like, yeah, this guy is awesome. So I was really excited when he came on with me. And so Sean's lived journey that has a lot of really interesting chapters. And from what I've learned, and he's going to tell me if I'm right or wrong in a minute, what I learned is from each of those chapters, he had some takeaways that then launched him into a new phase. And now he's using that to help other people, especially around his Real Mentors program that he's got. So I did write this down because I want to make sure that I get it right. But his Real Success Mentors program is focused on helping inner city youth so that they can launch to successful places and understanding the power of mentorship and connecting them. And so real life examples that are altering lives. And so I love that. I love how he's using his story and he's going and applying it to other people so that they can learn from both him and then develop in their own life. And of course, maybe most importantly, he's a dad. And so he knows what it's like to sit around the table. He knows what it's like to go through all the phases that we're all working through every single day. This is SkilledDad Podcast. Is what brings us all together is a commonality of being dads. And I love that we have the commonality of being dads. And then we can take all of our different stories and the differences in those and learn from each one. It only makes us better. So Sean, how was that? Did I miss anything regarding the Real Success?
You did amazing. And now I'm going to have to try and live up to that awesome introduction.
Okay, perfect. We'll set that bar. But so Sean, I'd love to just kind of hand it over to you, introduce yourself, hit on any of the basic things we missed, and then we'll just kind of pick up where we left off last week.
Sure. So as you said, my name is Sean Martin. I'm a healthcare entrepreneur, hopefully, and striving to be an impact and difference maker in the world through Real Success Mentors. But first and foremost, I am a husband and a father of two amazingly beautiful, challenging, making me rise to the occasion, little humans who are 7 years old and 2 years old. And what a ride it's been all around. But I would say that the hardest thing has been centered around raising that family. And a wise friend of mine, prior to me having a family or even considering having one, had always used that line, and I've adopted it as my own, which is something that your viewers and your listeners can remember whenever they're in a challenging time, which is raising a family is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life.
Mm. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
and it keeps changing.
It'll be the most rewarding as well. But like many of life's journeys, when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see it for the value that it presents to your life.
Yeah.
If you're doing it in a traditional sense of a nuclear family structure, like you and I, or if you're doing it as separate adults living separate lives, raising a child together, which is more common these days than ever, that presents its own challenges, but nonetheless, it causes us to rise to the occasion. It makes us more accountable. It makes us better human beings, hopefully. And I think the reason being is that it is not about you anymore. It's about other human beings.
Mhm.
And I think that's been the catalyst for me finally stepping into the idea of dedicating my life toward helping others. It's because having children has allowed me on a more intimate level to put others before myself. And I've seen the value of that. It really, really does um, help raise your level of awareness in so many facets. But more importantly, it takes the selfishness out of you. And as human beings, we all have selfish natures. As men striving to accomplish good things or great things, depending, whatever your journey is, you have to refocus and you have to get real around the fact that others are now counting on you to set the tone and be the example. And I think a lot of times in my own story, I can forget about that and put myself first. But coming home to those kids and that wife, that reminds me of what really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well said. I do think that one of the things that when we become dads, and once we have that title, it can't be taken away. And is that we have the choice to make whether we are
Right.
going to learn that selflessness and start to kind of essentially move away from this focus and have the outward focus. Or we can choose not to. And we're going to make an influence either way. It's going to be an impact either way. Is it going to be positive impact or is it not? So
And we
I would
talked
agree
about
with you on that.
Yeah, we talked about that as well. As men, we're leaders. We're naturally leaders. Whether or not we choose to answer the call is something totally different. But um, men were, I guess, designed in nature to lead their families. And again, it's a choice that some, out of whatever insecurities or maybe just not having the knowledge of how to do that, run from that responsibility or that challenge. And I'd say that I was that guy for a long time. I didn't want children. I didn't want a family. It was my wife who stuck by and kind of just kept planting those seeds. And, as men, we're okay being like in the honeymoon phase, but without the ring forever. And, it's more meaningful to the wife to have that ring and that level of commitment. And that's the beauty of relationships, positive, negative, like you said, path. But then there's also feminine energy and masculine energy in a relationship. And, that level of commitment traditionally is pushed by that feminine energy because that ring solidifies that bond and that relationship and that commitment to the relationship. And after that, it becomes, hey, when we having kids? And again, something I was extremely hesitant about And if I'm being honest, I think it's because I didn't grow up in an environment where there were a lot of healthy relationships. There weren't a lot of nuclear family structures. And, that's not even getting into the environmental factors of drugs and alcohol and growing up in the 90s in the Bronx, New York, where crack cocaine was, king and destroying communities. And that was the backdrop. So fear is pretty much what kept me from wanting to be married and wanting to be a dad because I didn't see any healthy relationships growing up. And I think going through the storm of life and coming out the other side better for having overcome those obstacles is why at this point in my life, I'm finally ready to step into that role as not only the leader of my clan and my family, but on a larger scale and going back to the neighborhoods where I realized that those kids don't have mentors, just like I didn't have a mentor. I was raised by a single mother who did her best, and she did an amazing job. So thank you, and thank you to all the single moms who do their best. But there is an importance of having masculine energy in a relationship. And I realize that now only through trial and error and being around other healthy nuclear families that I take pieces from and hope to adapt into my own life. So the Real Success Mentors came about years ago, but it's only now that I'm stepping into that purpose 100% because my family has been the ultimate training ground for me to step into that role as a leader and give me the confidence to now go out into the world and shine some of the light on the lessons that I've learned to a community that I know suffers from the same kind of ailments that I did growing up, which is single mother households, grandmothers raising kids. Unfortunately, there's a lack of male positive role models in communities of color, in inner cities. And I'm sure that goes to most communities that aren't doing well financially. But I am specifically concerned with what I know. And what I know is communities of color, inner cities, like where I grew up in the Bronx. And that's why I want to go back and do something positive with all the things that I've learned through trial and error and falling on my face.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting what you said about being a parent. So you had this idea for Real Success Mentors before,
Right.
and then you get in the training ground of being dad, and through that, and that's why I love when dads listen. I think it's one of those things, like you're going into a community that because you were there, you have the experience, you know how to speak the language, you know what it feels like. So then there's kind of this unspoken, it's hard to translate the understanding. When we become dads, we all have this understanding. The late nights with the diapers, the learning to walk, the milestones that go, the challenges of watching ourselves and what we're showing, because that's going to get caught, but then that prepares you for other things. And so that shared language allows us to have an understanding together as dads. So I'm curious with the idea, and you still had this desire even before you were dad, sounds like.
Yeah.
What, if anything in particular, was it that kind of got you to the point where you're like, you know what, now I'm ready to go and tackle this. Now I'm ready to go after this. Is there something in particular, or just the collection of things that kind of was the catalyst to say, I'm going to take that idea, I'm going to put action behind it?
So there were aha moments along the way, but it's the culmination of little, laying down bunts if you're a baseball fan, or, singles, base hits, walks, just getting on base, making things happen. So the biggest catalyst for myself was a couple years ago. My wife made a comment to me one morning, and she told me that my breath smelled like alcohol. And, I had to admit to myself, at the time I was drinking heavily, I was drinking daily, and it was becoming a problem for me because, like I said earlier, I was afraid of this family life, and I never saw it for myself. My wife saw it for us. She saw the potential in me that I didn't see for myself as a great leader of this family and of their lives. So my daughter was already 5 at the time, and my son had just been born. And my wife makes this very poignant comment to me at 7 in the morning. I had just brushed my teeth, rinsed my mouth. I just washed my mouth out with Listerine. She goes, "No, your breath smells like alcohol all the time." And it was the aha moment. I didn't fight her. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't taken aback. For some reason, that was the moment that I knew I had to stop drinking. And it was that simple. I had wanted to do it for so long, and I didn't have control over this one aspect of my life. It wasn't serving me, and I knew it. When I would go to take a drink, I knew it wasn't gonna be just 1 or 2. I was gonna keep going. And it would create shame, and it would create a lack of belief in myself. And that's a spiral that I think so many people go down. And it doesn't have to be with alcohol. It could just be with negative thoughts. It could be with other substances or other things that we use to dull our senses and sedate ourselves because we don't want to deal with the challenge that's in front of us. So we put it off, and we put it off in the form of, whether it's food or alcohol or Netflix or whatever. We all find a way to not deal with the thing that we need to deal with in order to grow and move forward. And after making that comment to me, I humbly decided to check myself into detox. I had tried to stop drinking prior, and unfortunately, my body was rejecting the idea of just quitting cold turkey.
Mhm.
And I just decided, you know what, fuck it. I'm gonna go into detox, but I run a business. I can't just disappear. So I strategically structured it about 3 or 4 weeks later to go into a detox program, which could last up to 6 days. And fortunately for me, the symptoms were never truly that bad, other than the withdrawal at night that I would have the inability to sleep. So I just asked them for they ended up prescribing me a heavy allergy pill. I was out of the detox in 3 days. The nurses didn't understand it. They didn't know I was a unicorn. I tried to tell them, but, they didn't buy it when I first got in there. Everybody's special. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, I showed improved. I was out in 3 days, and I just really dove into staying sober, whether it was through groups, counseling, both paid and free, that insurance covered and out of pocket, because I knew I didn't want this problem to seep over into my own ability to be great anymore. And that started at home. And it was the person that I love the most in this world that brought it to my attention, and I didn't fight him for 1 second. So that was really the catalyst that started it all. My son was only maybe 2 or 3 months old at the time.
Mm.
And I think as a man, and I'm not afraid to say it, there was a difference when my son was born, because there was that legacy in my mind. There was that little guy that was going to model their life after their hero, which is the dad. And that's not to say that my daughter, who's just like me, by the way, isn't equally as affected by my presence and who I am. But something clicked when my son was born, and my wife made that comment. And that was it for me. Getting sober was the catalyst, and staying sober was the goal. And I'll tell you a quick story before moving on. I was
Yeah.
going to AA meetings, and I happened to stumble into a great group in my neighborhood, which was very hardcore with the AA program. And I remember it not lining up necessarily with, how I wanted to stay sober, because everything revolves around the fear of having another drink. And it's tied into your identity that you're this alcoholic and you can't control anything. And while I have nothing but great things to say about that program, because it's changed more lives than I could ever hope to, it just wasn't sitting with me as far as, I'm an alcoholic. So everything I do revolves around the fact that I have a problem drinking alcohol. And again, different strokes for different folks. Again, the unicorn mentality comes in. And on the 6-month anniversary of sobriety, I got my coin. I walked up to the front of the room. I hugged the lady who was hosting the meeting. Everybody's thanking me on the way back, halfway there to the year mark. And I remember sitting down, and she's like, "Hey, Sean." I was like, "Oh, my name is Sean and I'm an alcoholic." And that was the last meeting I had attended. And The reason being was not because the program doesn't work. It was just that I made the decision in those 6 months to lead a completely different life, to live up to the standard of the identity that deep down in my soul, I wanted for myself. And that was to be a man of purpose, a man of family, and a man of integrity. And on the surface, I was those things, but deep down inside, I was hurting and I was masking that with alcohol and just numbing myself from a lot of the responsibilities. So since then, it has been the best 2 years of my life. I'll be celebrating 2 years in a couple of weeks, actually. And yeah, I mean, that would be it. It was getting sober and giving me the clarity to then put the importance on the things that mattered as opposed to just not wanting to deal with them. So things are tough when you stop and decide to make that decision, but things get easier like anything else because your resilience and your ability to deal with things becomes better.
Mm-hmm. I have a follow-up question, but what would you, for anybody that's listening that might be struggling with something like that, and you're on the other side, almost 2 years now, which congratulations.
Thank you.
What would you say to them? Because that's an area that you understand, you felt, you've gone through, and they might be at the earlier stages of where you were. What would you say to them?
My first thought when you asked me that was, wow, I don't want the responsibility of trying to help somebody struggling with that. But that's the fear that I discussed. It's the hesitancy to have some kind of, not power, but influence over the life of another, because ultimately it boils down to that person. And, there's a saying in recovery about, you got to hit your rock bottom. You don't have to be homeless in the street. You don't have to alienate all of your family members to get the point. Some people do, unfortunately, yes. But at the end of the day, it's the realization that you and only you are in control of your destiny. And if substance or any kind of vice, because now we're talking, outside of the realm of substances, and you're using that as a vice, honesty with yourself, first and foremost. You have to be willing to admit to yourself that you've lost control over your ability to manage whatever vice that is. So when you're in control of that vice and you want to have the occasional drink, or you're on vacation and you want to get, wasted on occasion, that's fine for an average person. But if you know that you have a problem with substances, whether it be alcohol or drugs, pornography, whatever, you have to be willing to admit to yourself that you've lost control of that vice and it's now in control of you. And once you realize that that thing is not serving you, then you've taken the first step. The second step is to seek help, because if you had the ability to rid yourself of that problem by yourself, you probably would have already. So yes, that means you, whoever's listening, if you could beat this thing on your own, whatever it is that's holding you back, you probably would have done it already. So seek out help and don't be ashamed of it. There's plenty of it out. And that was the catalyst and the change for me, was when I sought out help. I could have went to a doctor and got some pills to help me with that anxiety that I was getting from the withdrawals. But I put myself back in a prison of sorts to hammer home the fact that, dude, this problem has now taken control of your life. And it's only in the beginning stages. This thing could have gotten way out of control. Well, yeah, then I'm blowing up my entire family to continue, drinking or chasing vices. So admit to yourself that you have a problem and seek help. Don't be too proud. If you would have had this shit figured out, you would have done it already.
No, that's fair. Sounds like you put yourself in a shark tank. Like not a shark tank, but like a shark cage rather than a prison, because you got all the vices coming at you from the outside. He's like, you know what? Now I know if I swim out there for right now, I'm going to get bit. So I'm going to go in here where I can at least be safe and get a plan to then get out. No, that's interesting. I didn't mean to
No, not at all. I always
Spouse.
find
Okay.
that is one of the most powerful parts of my story that people gravitate toward. I mean, I've some people live life through, you know, just kind of going through a system, or, you'll build a career on doing the same thing, throughout the course of 10, 15, 20, 30 years, all your life, and you get great at it. I've been a student of life in terms of I just figure shit out the hard way all the time. So I'm stubborn in this regard. It serves me well, but it also serves to hold me back. And I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that they can do things on their own. I think there's a lot of men out there, there's a lot of people out there that think the same and, get trapped, because you paint yourself into a corner sometimes. But before it's too late, there's always help. There's always help you can seek out. So I don't mind sharing that message. I don't mind talking about it because I know that there's somebody listening right now that's going to benefit from that conversation.
Yep. And I do too. So I appreciate you sharing it. And
No,
you're in good company, because I think I can only speak for myself, not for everybody listening. But yeah, there's oftentimes I can do that on my own. I don't need to go outside or, go to somebody else. I got this. And then you learn the hard way, and then you have to restart. Whereas then you talk to somebody that knew a little bit more. They were a chapter ahead in the book of you, and you talk to them, you learn from them, you're like, oh, I could have totally saved time, money, and, a bunch of other stuff, but we learn lessons. So it's what we do with those lessons. One other thing that you mentioned about the identity, I thought it kind of hit, because I had a recent conversation about that. And, uh, when the identity becomes either that thing or who we start to believe that we are, until we can take on a new identity. I know for a lot of people that do listen to this, and just talking to several of them, that now the skilled dad has become part of their identity, and how we look at ourselves and how we approach things. Because holistically, what we do is not just fixing stuff or, playing games, but it's all the things, is, managing our household, the marriage, if we're married, um,
Uh,
working well with our former spouse, if that's the case, because of the kids, all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning. So I know, I appreciate you sharing all that, and just that's part of your journey. It's who you are, product of the things that you've experienced, and again, you're using that. And I'd love to kind of start to parlay that to the mentorship side of it, because you've seen the power of mentorship. Some of your story is getting around people that gave you a different perspective, that helped you learn. And I think that's something maybe I haven't talked a whole lot about. I talk a lot about, and with guys, I've talked about the topic of having good men around you, which is a form of mentorship, like peers, guys our age,
all right.
guys in the same season. But then there's also the opportunity to go and seek out those that are further ahead in the book than we are. And just from your perspective, what have you seen with, clearly you believe in the power of mentorship and what it can do. What have you seen? And then what are some things that other guys could do to either go seek that or go be that to someone else?
The first thing I'll say to lead up to that is that everything that we've gone through in our lives, good, bad, or otherwise, have led up to us being the person that we are now. And as hurtful, as painful, and as traumatic as some of the past may be, we have to learn to embrace it and let it go, because if we don't, it's going to have a bearing on who we are in the future. And with that said, so many people where I come from grow up in single parent households, predominantly mothers or grandmothers, that they're digging themselves out of a hole when it comes to becoming a male role model to others, because they oftentimes have not had that for themselves. So I have been fortunate enough to make the mistakes and still land on my feet the majority of the time. Have a woman in my corner who has allowed me to be me and grow up, and then grow into the man that was finally ready to have children. But then it was on me to grow into the man that I wanted to become in order to be the best role model I could for my children. So with that said, if you're a man out there who can admit to himself that he's not necessarily the version of himself that he wants to be, to your point, I would say get in a skilled dad type of environment. Get yourself into a room, a dad's support group. There's plenty out there. I've never been to one, but I know they exist. I've had friends send me information. There's nationwide options, there's virtual options, and I am sure there are local options of fathers leaning on other fathers and other men for guidance and for mentorship as to handle that. Don't think that you have it all figured out on your own. Being a parent is, like I said, and I'll continue to say, one of the hardest things you'll ever do in this life. So don't feel afraid to open a book, listen to an audio book, listen to a podcast, watch a YouTube video on parenting. Like anything else in life, we need to educate ourselves on how to do things. And there's a couple of ways to do that. You can educate yourself through trial and error, like I've done so much of my life. And that's the long way. You can pick up a book with the cautionary tale of don't become too book smart, because we've got to apply that to life, right? And books are just theories. If you can find a balance of both, and then in a perfect world, you'll find the people, the men, the leaders, the fathers, and the families that you can get around to learn those lessons. Because no family's perfect, but they do have strengths that you can then take and adopt into your own life, that you can model after, or that you can strive for. And if you come from an environment like mine where the nuclear family is not the norm, then you need to go seek that information out. It's not going to find you, unfortunately, because that environment just doesn't have it. So for me, it was getting around good men who were family first men, God-fearing men, and again, not perfect, but way better than what I saw growing up. And that has allowed me to adopt what I've learned from some of them. And I have a good friend of mine who started his family prior to mine, and he's the guy who told me raising a family is the hardest thing you'll ever do. One of my good friends, and we'll be at each other's funerals. And, well, one of us will be at the other one's funeral, but you know what I mean?
I got you.
I've seen it develop from, I was the knucklehead kid from the Bronx who played his music too loud and, said this outlandish shit, because the behavior that we grew up with is not necessarily the normal behavior, but to us it's normal. And then as I've grown up and I've grown as a man, I've seen myself start my own family, and now this great friend of mine looks to me for guidance, looks to me as an example of holy shit. And that person had an influence on me, mind you, years prior to me having a family. So, how the tables have turned. And I don't say that in any braggadocious way. I'm just saying that anybody out there who's struggling with the idea or being afraid of what a good family structure or good fatherhood looks like, you're capable of it too. But you've got to put in the work. And it's that simple. You got to put in the work, and you got to be patient, because the shit takes a lifetime. And unfortunately, it's not a test where you can, you can get a score on it. There's no particularly perfect way or right way to do it. There's probably some really wrong ways to do it, but you're just doing the best that you can. And you've got to know that you're doing the best that you can, but you've got to honestly be doing the best that you can. And doing the best that you can requires you to be learning. If you're just winging it, let's say you had a business and you're just winging it, how well do you expect that business to do? If you're in a family, don't just wing it. Take the time to learn. And I think that's a component that even me being in all these self-development workshops and masterminds over the last couple of years, people are quick to put this effort into a business, but not necessarily their relationships. And that is the key. treat your relationship like you treat your business, and the rest will work itself out. And I think we haven't touched on the component yet. Being a great parent, if you're in a relationship still with your significant other, requires being a great partner. And I think all too often nowadays, you hear the term helicopter parents, and I live in a suburban setting where people have eliminated outside threats of danger. You know, coming from the Bronx, there's crime, there's all kinds of variables that could get you into trouble, which I've come across in my life, as you know. And I think when you're raised in a safe environment, those external threats are so few and far between that it becomes, how can we save our kids from any kind of strife or any kind of hardship? And you end up doing them a disservice. And that's where the term helicopter parents come in, because they want to save their kids from everything. And unfortunately, like I said, you're doing them a disservice because they're never going to learn to do anything for themselves. But you'd be hard pressed to explain that to many people, because saving their kids is probably what gives them purpose. And it's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from a place of wanting to protect your children from the dangers of the world. But I think it's the dangers of the world that shape and mold us to become strong human beings. And I struggle with that myself now, being well off and having transcended poverty and dangers of the streets, to now navigating, well, how do I not raise my kids to be soft and weak? And it's a challenge that admittedly I don't have the answer to, but I'm learning through others who have done well and who have the financial comfort of life that they've created for themselves and their family, as to how they can still instill the values and the hardships and the lessons that they're capable of presenting to their children without rescuing them. So my 7-year-old daughter is capable of making breakfast for herself on the stove. And to most parents where I'm from, that's probably a no-no. But, you know, the way I look at it is, I'm teaching her to be self-sufficient. My wife actually is the one, so I'm not the one cooking. Let me give my wife the credit here. She's given her the permission to take care of herself or feed herself in the morning. Now, mind you, we watch her if she's doing that, but she's capable of doing it. And that is building confidence, and it is giving her strength to believe that she can solve problems on her own. So even little things like that, having the knowledge, didn't come naturally. It came from watching other parents or YouTube or whatever, because we didn't know. You know, we don't have that tight family structure that some people are fortunate to have. So we had to create it on our own. And that brings me to the relationship. One thing that we spoke about on the phone, which I'd love to touch on, is the importance of your relationship with your significant other. I always pose the question, if your relationship were better with your husband or your wife, would your relationships with your children be better? I personally think the answer is a resounding yes. But I think when parents have children, everything becomes about the children. And again, I'm no guru, but I just know that my kids are always going to get what they need. So why not take the time to focus on what we need as a couple to make sure that we're intact? Because not only am I leading the family as the man, but my wife and I are leading our family as the leaders of this family together. So we've got to make sure that we're in lockstep. And that comes through date nights. That comes through communication about how we want to raise our children or the lessons that we want to teach them. And I think oftentimes people don't take the time to work on their relationship because life is busy. You've got work, you've got family, you've got relationships, you've got bills, you've got stresses, and it can easily get convoluted to a point where you're not focusing on your relationship with your significant other. And you fall out of love, and it becomes a marriage of convenience. It becomes about raising these kids, and you forget to fulfill each other's needs, which is, if we remember, essentially what got us to this point. Because the love that you felt for another human being enough to get married and want to spend your life with them when you made that commitment is lost because of all the noise that comes in after you make that commitment. So I, I just want to say to everybody listening to take the time to remember why you fell in love with the person that you married and try to do your best to come back to that place as often as you can, because it will indescribably make the relationship that you have with your children better.
I think it's interesting that we want to teach them how to cook. We want to teach them how to ride bikes, how to do a lot of different things to prepare them. It's also important to show them how to love, because even if we don't, if they don't, if we're not telling them, hey, here's how to do this, like when we read our books, hey, here's how to do this or whatever, it's really what we show them. And like you said, with the relationship, if we show them what a healthy love is, we show them what that communication is, they're going to pick up on that. They're also going to pick up on the other side of that, of what coldness could be, or tone, or the lack of good communication. And so I'm with you on that. And it is one of those things that, to use the word intentionality, you have to be intentional about, but to your analogy of the business. And I think this is something that isn't shared enough, where for those that are successful in business, there's things that got you there to be successful, usually good leadership skills, good communication skills, good planning skills, delegation skill. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3. Start listing those things that you're good at work, and then ask yourself, okay, are any of those skills transferable, and am I using them at home? Because really, they're pretty much all transferable, but there seems to be this hat shift that when we get out of the car or off the airplane and we go home, that those things no longer apply in the same way. So what happens if for 1 week, you're not doing it now, but for 1 week, you take some of those things from your list, you say, okay, cool, I'm going to actually treat this. And we don't want to turn our family into a business, but it operates a similar way. Are you profitable with finances? There's profit there, or are you, at a loss consistently? But what happens if you take some of those skills and actually maybe shift the mindset on how we approach that and apply it to the home life? And I think you're going to see some really interesting things. And like you had mentioned before, it's not one and done. This is a marathon, that we continue to have jogs in the road that we didn't know were going to be coming. And so we have to adjust and adapt. But with that relationship, especially with our spouse, if we're married in that situation, the kids are going to grow up, and then they're going to leave. And then you're going to look at your partner, and what are you going to find? And so that's an investment that's going to have massive return, or it's going to be at a loss. So it is up to us to choose what we want to do with that.
Absolutely. And the word is intentionality. You have to be intentional about it. And I think so many of us are just floating through life. We're continuing to tell ourselves whatever stories that we've told ourselves up to this point, because so much of what we get in life is the story that we're telling ourselves. And for me, for so many years, that story was, I've never seen a relationship that works. I've never seen a happy marriage. So why would it work for me? And the question that I now ask myself is, well, who do I know that has a happy marriage or that is fulfilled in their relationship? What are they doing? How are they doing it? And how can I learn to apply those things into my own life? Now, that is through growth, maturity, and time. That's not a question that a 20-something-year-old is going to be asking, unless they had an upbringing that would, have them ask themselves that kind of question. But for me, it was just, I had to get to a point in my life where I started to ask myself those questions. So intentionality, be intentional about the story that you're telling yourself. It's so easy to look at the things that your spouse is doing and revert back to the old story you were telling yourself, whether it's me as a husband leaving clothes on the floor right in front of the hamper, which my wife, that's her favorite, um, or something that she may do to annoy me. And I'm smart enough to not delve into any of those things, not publicly at least. But I think it's a story that we need to understand that we're telling ourselves in order to change the story. How can I be the best dad? How can I be the best husband? Stop focusing on the things that you're not getting and start focusing on the things that you want to be getting. So I know that's a mindset thing that isn't going to be soaked up by all of the listeners immediately. You've got to get to a place where you understand that your outcomes are a direct result of the story you're telling yourself. So if you're at a place in life where you're, up there in years in your 30s or 40s and you still haven't accomplished what you want to accomplish, what stories are you telling yourself? What's the voice inside of your head telling yourself? If you're in a marriage that's unhappy, what stories are you telling yourself? Forget your spouse. Forget what they do, forget what he does, forget what she does to annoy you. What fucking stories are you telling yourself to perpetuate the cycle that you can't seem to get out of? And for years it was, marriage doesn't work. She doesn't do these things that, that I wanted to do, or in my particular relationship, I'm the breadwinner. I have been for quite some time, and that's fine with me in terms of I don't throw it in her face in terms of, oh, you need to be providing. I took on the role as provider, but then I walked away from the role as a dad, thinking that, oh, because I'm providing, all the other familial stuff's on her. And boy, was I wrong. She's in the trenches. She's doing a job that you couldn't pay me enough to do full time. So it was only with sobriety, clarity, and perspective shift that I was able to learn to appreciate her for everything that she brings to the table. Because it's easy for me as someone who is the breadwinner to say, well, I'm providing, I'm doing my part, and you're supposed to be raising the family and you're not doing your part. It's because it's a stressful ass job. And the kids tugging at you all day. Mom gets the kind of attention that dad doesn't. Dad can always be the fun one and play around, and you have a certain energy of control when you raise your voice or you stomp your feet. There's a different energy that the kids react to as opposed to mom telling them to stop, let's say.
Yeah.
So intentionality. Pay attention to what the hell's going on instead of just floating through the day. But like you said, you go out there, you work all day, you wear one hat, and you come home, and now you got to put on hat number 2. And I think that's foreign to people to be able to shift identities. I had a long day. I don't want to deal with this. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. But then your children are suffering. It's not easy. Life is full of noise, but you have to be intentional about it. And you made an amazing point about your children seeing the relationship, because we've all heard the quote that children don't listen to what you tell them, but they see you for what you do. And the relationship that you're presenting with your significant other, your spouse, whether it be your wife, your girlfriend, your baby mama, whatever, that is a mirror into what their future looks like. There's a high potential for that being, what their life looks like, because how many of us are very similar to our parents and we curse them for so long, but they are the model for us as human beings. And that's a huge responsibility that I think in the moment most people don't understand. Is you're not just impacting your life and the life of your spouse, you're impacting the life of the children that you decided to bring into the world. And it's a heavy burden to bear, and not everybody has the tools. So I'm just hoping that this conversation could shed some light and just put some gems that people can use in their pocket when they need to pull them out.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing those things, those insights, both from your context of your life, of what your journey has been, as well as where you are, and just being real with it. And also the encouragement for the guys that are listening. And I know that there's moms listening too. And I know a couple single moms that listen to this. I
Nice.
also grew up, in a single mom household for a time. And regardless of where you are, there's one thing that's on top of my mind right now, which is if you don't know where you want to go, how are you going to get there? And so if you want something tactical and practical to go do right now, I just find a sheet of paper, find a napkin, get a crayon, whatever around you, a pen, whatever you got, put it on your phone, and just think about, hey, like in 3 years, what do I want things to look like? What do I want to look like? And guess what? Whatever you put down is not wrong,
It's
because what
just
you're
an
putting,
idea.
it's an idea. Put it down. Don't let fear get in your way. No one's going to know. Put it down, because now you've taken an action, and then walk away from it, come back to it and say, hey, is that really kind of what I'm thinking? Okay. You can modify it. Now, guess what you've just done? You've started to create a vision, and where there is no vision, the people perish. And when we have no vision, the people in this case are our families, and you're not just impacting your wife, your kids, you're also going to impact the kids that they may have, and the kids that they may have, and the kids that they may have, because of what they see. And so you can be the difference maker in what you choose to do. So
Hey man,
I,
I have a
I,
mentor who says, who are the people that are going to suffer most if you don't step into the man that you're supposed to be?
mm,
And the first people on the list are always the people you love the most, because they're not getting the best version of you. I got goosebumps when you said that, because that's exactly the mission I've been on these last couple of years, is to be the best version of me that I can be, and automatically translates into them having a better version of me and being in turn better versions of themselves.
yeah,
You're a leader. And like you said at the beginning of the hour, which was, you're leading down a path. Which path is it? Is it the good path, or is it the bad path? The right path or the wrong path? But either way, you're leading. So be intentional about where you're leading your people.
amen, man. I love it. Hey, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you got going on?
Sure. We've got a great presence on Instagram. That's our big platform. It's the Sean Martin. That is the fancy British pronunciation for the Sean Martin. TheSeanMartin. I've also got platforms on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and soon we will be releasing the Beyond the Bronx book, which we are about halfway done with. We're hoping to be done by the fall. And that'll be a testament to not only my journey, but we're also going to kind of spell out some of the lessons that I've learned along the way and how you can apply those to your own life. And one of the big topics in the book will obviously be family as well, and how that's impacted my life and given it purpose. And then even led me down the path of finding my greater purpose, which is to help others.
Hmm. Love it. Let me know when that comes out so I can share with everybody and
I will,
also get a
brother. I
copy.
appreciate
I'm
it.
gonna read that bad boy. Um, hey, I just want to say I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate how you've um, grown and taken the lessons, what you've achieved, what you're continuing to do, and now in the dad zone with a 7 and a 2-year-old. Every single day, you're doing something big. You're making an impact, and now to take that and go and put it at a larger scale, and also teach others how to do that. I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on here with me on the SkilledDad Podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me once again. Sincerely, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your mission, getting these messages out to dads like yourself and me and all across the country and the world, because it is much needed information for sure.
Thank you, sir. I'll talk to
Thank
you
you.
soon. I want to stay in touch, and
Absolutely.
keep track of the world impact that you got going on, brother.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
All right, brother.
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you for being on and listening. And I know that you took something away from Sean's story today. If you're looking for that thing that you are trying to figure out where you want to be, just do that simple exercise. Write it down, push it out, and then come back to it and say, hey, is this where I want to be? That gives you something to actually focus on. That then allows you to go and create action steps that are going to drive that. And from there, you can then have your vision. And then once you've got that vision, I would say, hey, go and sit down with your wife, your spouse, your partner, whoever it might be, and make sure that your vision and their vision align. Because you could be leading in the right path and they might think they're leading the right path. But if you're leading that household, make sure you're leading in the same direction. So just like every time, I'd say, take what you've learned from Sean, see what you can apply, because a lot of knowledge is great, but it's just good trivia if you don't apply it. And once you apply it and learn and then apply it again, that's when you become skilled. So that's my challenge for you. And I just want to say, go take what you can learn, apply it on your journey to becoming the skilled dad.